I want to tell you about the most difficult thing I ever attempted as a writer. Not the most technically demanding, not the most philosophically complex, the most difficult. I wrote it in a letter to my niece while I was working on the novel, and I was honest enough to admit that I was terrified of what I had set out to do. I wrote, "There is nothing more difficult than to portray a perfectly good man." And then I tried anyway. And what the attempt produced, what the novel showed me that I had not fully understood before I wrote it, is the thing I want to speak to you about now. Because it is not a comfortable thing. It is, in fact, one of the most painful truths I know. The world does not know what to do with genuine goodness. And what it cannot understand, it destroys. Prince Mishkin arrives in St. Petersburg from a sanatorium in Switzerland. He is 26 years old. He is epileptic. He has no money, no social position worth speaking of, no cunning, no strategy. What he has, and I want you to understand that I am describing this not as a weakness but as the rarest human achievement, is an almost total absence of self-interest. When Mishkin looks at you, he is actually looking at you. Not at what you can do for him, not at how you fit into his plans, not at your usefulness or your status or your threat level, at you, the actual person standing before him with your actual suffering and your actual dignity, both of which he perceives with a clarity that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. He walks into the drawing rooms of Petersburg society, a society drenched in calculation, in social performance, in the exhausting management of appearances. And he simply does not play the game. Not because he is too stupid to understand the rules. He understands them perfectly. He simply cannot make himself follow them, because following them would require him to treat the people in front of him as pieces in a game rather than as human beings. And he is constitutionally incapable of that reduction. Now watch what happens, because this is the heart of everything. Petersburg society does not welcome him. It cannot. A man without self-interest is not just unusual in a world organized entirely around self-interest. He is a threat. He is a living accusation. Every time Mishkin enters a room and responds to someone with genuine, uncalculated compassion, every person in that room feels, whether they admit it or not, the distance between what he is and what they are, and that feeling is intolerable, because it does not arrive as a judgment. Mishkin never judges anyone, which somehow makes it worse. It arrives as a mirror. He is simply himself, completely and without apology, and the reflection that produces in the people around him is one they did not ask to see and do not want, so they call him an idiot. The title of the novel, and I chose it with great deliberateness, is not a medical description. It is society's verdict on a man it cannot categorize. In ancient Greek, the word idiot meant simply a private person, someone outside the public game, someone not playing. That is exactly what Mishkin is. He is outside the game. And the game, which cannot tolerate observers, labels him deficient, naive, simple, an idiot. Because the alternative, acknowledging that he sees clearly and that the rest of them are the ones who are confused, is a conclusion they are not prepared to draw. Nastasia Filipovna is the woman at the center of this novel, and she is one of the most devastating human beings I have ever written. She was abused as a child, taken in as a ward by a wealthy man who used her, who shaped her early life into a thing of beauty for his own purposes and called it care. By the time Mishkin meets her, she has been so thoroughly convinced of her own unworthiness, by the man who abused her, by the society that judged her for what was done to her, that she has made self-destruction into a kind of religion. She burns everything good that comes near her, not from cruelty, from a conviction so deep it has become her architecture that she does not deserve to be saved. And then Mishkin looks at her. For the first time in her life, a man looks at her and does not see a fallen woman, does not see a scandal, does not see a beautiful object with a complicated history. He sees her, the actual person, the person beneath the shame and the armor and the performance of her own damnation. He tells her she is not guilty. He says this simply, without drama, without agenda, because it is what he sees, and he cannot say anything other than what he sees, and it nearly breaks her open. She is moved in a way she has not been moved since before the world taught her what she was worth. But here is the tragedy, and I need you to understand this clearly, because it is the exact point the novel is making, not as a story detail, but as a diagnosis of the human condition. Nastasia cannot accept what Mishkin offers, not because he is wrong, because she has been destroyed so thoroughly by the world's verdict on her that genuine love, love without conditions, without transaction, without the shadow of what she owes in return, feels more terrifying than the destruction she already knows. She runs from Mishkin. She runs toward Rogojin, a man whose love is violent and consuming and entirely comprehensible to her, because it contains the punishment she has decided she deserves. She understands Rogojin's world. It is the world she was raised in, the world of damage and hunger and being used. Mishkin's world, the world of being seen as she actually is a country she does not know how to inhabit. She goes to Rogojin. He kills her. And Mishkin, who predicted this, who saw it coming from the very first moment, who could not stop it because genuine goodness has no coercive power, it can only offer and hope and sometimes watch helplessly as the offer is refused. Mishkin sits through the night beside her body. By morning, he has collapsed back into the idiocy the world always said he was. He is sent back to the sanatorium in Switzerland. He is gone. Now, I want to ask you something, because this is where the novel stops being a story and becomes a question directed at you personally. Who failed here? Who is responsible for this wreckage? The easy answer is Rogojin. He held the knife. He is the one sentenced to 15 years of hard labor in Siberia. But I am not interested in the easy answer. I am interested in the true one. The true answer is that a world was assembled piece by piece long before Mishkin ever arrived in Petersburg that made this outcome almost inevitable. A world in which a child could be abused by a man of wealth and social standing, and the shame would fall on the child. A world in which genuine compassion was so foreign, so structurally incompatible with the way things worked, that the only vocabulary available for it was idiocy. A world in which a woman who had been told her whole life that she was unworthy of love could stand at the threshold of actually being loved and find that she had no language for crossing it. Rogojin pulled the knife, but the world handed it to him decades earlier. Mishkin did not fail. Goodness did not fail. What failed was everything around goodness. Every institution, every social norm, every learned habit of self-protection and calculation that made genuine human contact feel dangerous rather than necessary. I said in this novel, through a young nihilist who challenges Mishkin directly, that beauty will save the world. Mishkin does not answer the question when it is put to him. He stays silent. And that silence is the most honest thing in the book. Because what I believe, and what the entire tragedy of the novel is working toward, is something more complicated than a declaration. I believe that beauty, that genuine goodness, that the kind of radical human presence Mishkin embodies, contains within it something that the world cannot produce on its own and cannot ultimately destroy, even when it destroys the person who carries it. Nastasia, in her last moments before she runs to Rogojin, knows she is seen. She carries that knowledge into her death. It does not save her life, but it reaches something in her that nothing else had reached. And that reaching, that brief, impossible contact between genuine goodness and a soul that had given up on being seen, is not nothing. Even when it ends in tragedy, it is not nothing. But I will not lie to you. I will not dress this up. The novel ends in ruins. The good man is broken. The damaged woman is dead. The passionate murderer is in chains. And the society that produced all three of them goes on largely unchanged. Its drawing room still full of the same calculations and performances and careful management of appearances. Mishkin's presence did not reform it. His compassion did not heal it. His refusal to play the game did not change the game. What it did was reveal the game for what it is. And that revelation, that moment when genuine goodness walks into a room and the room cannot absorb it, is the most honest indictment of a society that I know how to write. Not an argument, not a political program, a person so completely himself, so entirely without the armor that everyone else has learned to wear, that his mere presence makes the armor visible. And the armor, once made visible, can never quite pretend to be skin again. This is why I was terrified to write him, because there is only one truly good man I could point to as the model, and that man was also called an idiot by the world that encountered him, was also destroyed by the machinery of respectable society, was also unable to use coercive power to stop what was coming, and whose defeat was also, in some sense that resists explanation, not a defeat at all. Mishkin is my attempt at Christ placed inside a 19th century Russian drawing room, and the novel is my answer to the question of what happens when you do that. The world does not recognize him. The world does not have the capacity to recognize him. And so the world, with perfect efficiency and no particular malice, and this is the most important part, there is no villain here, only a system. The world unmakes him. What do you do with that? I have been asking myself that question since I finished writing the novel, and I do not have a clean answer. What I have is this. The fact that goodness is destroyed by the world does not mean that goodness was wrong to exist. It means the world is sick, and a sick world does not become well by adjusting its behavior. It becomes well, if it becomes well at all, by being confronted again and again with the thing it cannot absorb, with the person who will not wear the armor, with the idiot who looks at you and sees you, actually sees you, and will not pretend otherwise, no matter what it costs him. Mishkin is gone. He is back in his sanatorium in Switzerland, staring at the wall, past the point where words reach him. He lost. By every measure the world uses to calculate winning and losing, he lost completely. And yet, I cannot say he was wrong. I cannot say that what he brought into those Petersburg drawing rooms was anything other than the truest thing in the book. I cannot say that his defeat proves goodness is naive. What it proves is something harder and more important, that the world's capacity to destroy what is genuinely good is not evidence against goodness. It is the most precise possible measurement of how far the world still has to go.